So, okay, we're still on the design thing, and I know you all came to because you're curious about lighting, but lighting is totally redundant without something to illuminate. I'll go back to the smoke thing. We'll get into technique of lighting. It's stupidly simple. This is the complicated stuff. First thing I ever did was atom henge here. It's a cross between the Atonium in Brussels and Stonehenge. It's getting very Spinal Tap now, isn't it? Okay, so this was the drawing. A friend of mine did this for me, Larry Smart. If you can't draw, go to an art school. You'll find somebody who can draw. Give them a few shillings, sorry, a few dollars, and they'll sketch for you. You can direct people. You've got the idea in your head. You just need to get it down on paper. And they can be real cartoons. They can be really rough napkins. This is actually quite a good rendering. So I just did this. Oh, wrong button. This button. And then months later, a lot of fiberglass. We made this illuminating. Inside those are just ordinary 200-watt light bulbs on festoon cable, wooden backs. This is homemade. The mold for making the geodes was made of clay. A lot of carving and sculpting, just made one big mold. The legs, or the connecting to the next part of the atom model, were also made out of one mold, and then you cut them at different lengths. Because they were tapered, we could get different sizes by cutting them at different types of. But this mold was it was about half a ton of brown clay, and we just did it with knives. And I hired art students to help. And we made spaceships. This is a band called Hawkwind, real psychedelic. This is the remains of the early light shows I used to do, animated slides. These are terrible pictures because they are copies of copies. This here is actually a water effect. It's a box effect. It's a picture of sea, and it has 3 pieces of warped glass in it, and the 3 pieces of glass go up and down in front of the slide. Remember the big previous in the history moment, the last pictures of those big disc effect projectors. Well, this is actually what they call a box effect, and it's in that same projector, and it just moves up and down. And it distorts the picture of sea waves and makes it sort of look as it's got a good swell to it. They don't make those things anymore. In fact, I saw one on eBay being sold as an antique. Here's a good example of how bad a drawing you can get away with. This is the only drawing I did for Peter Gabriel in 1985. This was for the So Tour 1986, 87. And we had this idea. He and I were having a private conference. If you're going to have one creative person in the room, try and keep all the others out of the room. The managers, the production managers, because they're all the no people. You want the yes guy on his own. What do you want, Peter? I don't know. So we talk about this, and we talk about that, and he kept getting back to, well, we could use this, and he was becoming specific again. No, stop that. Just think picture. Don't think about the machinery. Think the end result. Anyway, he said he's very frustrated at this point. He said, so what's your best idea? I said, oh, easy. Crane ballet. I want to get a whole cityscape of big, tall construction tower cranes, and they pick up different pieces. And, oh, what a good idea. Cranes. Camera cranes. So we decided camera cranes. A lot of research. No camera crane was suitable. They're big, horrible, ugly, really awkward to manhandle. Except there was this one little crane made of aluminum. It was about 4 foot long, and it had a parallelogram, which you'll see later, and it sits on a little dolly, and there was a camera at the top. How about this? We went to the guy who built the little 5-footer and said, can you build them 22 feet long? And he kind of raised his eyebrows and came back the next day and said, yeah, I can't see why not. So we did. We built 4 of them. These are actually, in the end, they ended up 24 feet tall. At the top here are 3 Mark I Verilights. The 3 of them and the little bracket at the top, all and cable, weighed a total of about 170 pounds. Down here at the back end, there are lead bricks that weighed 550 pounds and a few ounces. And they were manually operated. There's the man sitting in his little dolly seat. And they would tilt down. They could rotate a complete 360. And they could also go around the whole stage on the one camera track. They were all sharing the same track. And they had extra large skateboard wheels made out of polypropylene. And we had those cast by Kryptonics, the skateboard wheel manufacturers. You go to most things are obvious. Take it to the obvious. I want these big wheels because they'll be more stable. And I would, well, skateboard wheels were being made, and I knew where the company was. I found them. So these actually became quite clever. They had performance characters. They beat him up. They cuddled him. They moved into different positions. There were only 103 lights in this whole rig. And quite a lot of them were photographic lamps, you'll see here. These are just news gathering stuff. These are Lowell Omni DPs. They come in a suitcase, 4 at a time, with a little stand and barn doors. And each person has a key light. Everybody was lit pretty much for television. I keep coming to that. We'll come right to that because this is a very important conversation, the television thing. Here's the follow spot operator. There was a truss that ran diagonally across here, then it went upstage, and then it had another one that dropped down. It was really asymmetric. And they ran around the stage, and this is a 3-second time lapse. And you can see this crane is coming here. This is Peter rolling around the floor, and they are individually coming down and beating him up, really. The song was called No Self-Control, so it was completely out of control. The only time we actually hurt anybody with this was the guitarist, and he walked off of where he should have been, and it clipped him one. You know. Shouldn't have moved off his mark. Peter knew how to avoid it because it was rehearsed. It wasn't spontaneous. So that was how that process worked. And the key to that design simply was, don't let anybody in the conference of the concept. That's the most valuable moment for a designer, is try and get your client on his own, or try and get rid of the no men. The accountants never. Managers sometimes. Sometimes you can't get rid of them, but really don't let your production manager in. Not because you don't like the production manager, but the production manager is already critiquing how he's going to deal with it. You haven't even got halfway through the construction of a good idea, and he's already saying, no, that won't work. And most people actually are negative first. You can prove it, and then they'll know, and then they'll say, oh yeah, I suppose we could do this. And then they get creative. A production manager who's creative is really good fun. Right, so more design. Sketches, it's all done with sketches. This is Adam Sandler. Brief. I want it to be in my mum's backyard. This is all comedy, so this is really funny. I want this to be in my mum's backyard, and the drive-in movie is 2 blocks down the street. And that was the only drawing I did. Actually, I did the drawing, somebody else did the coloring. And here it is. Where do you find all the stuff for your mum's backyard? Home Depot. This entire set was built by hand with material from Home Depot. Plastic trellis for the drum kit. He was in the jacuzzi. Here was a patio with regular umbrellas. There is actually a light shining up into the umbrella. A little photographic lamp. Oh, dear me. Excuse me. And here with the vocalists, 3 girls, Watty Wattel. Somebody was always playing basketball behind the chain link fence. There was a little garage with a window, black window, and all sorts of silhouette pantomimes went on in there. This is just an idea. Now, this is a demonstration of why I prefer hand drawings, because this is to demonstrate trussing in roof and a grand entrance from underneath the drum riser, who's at 8 feet, blast of light, and they come out here. Or I could show it like this. I prefer the drawing. This is so clinical. Yes, it's really good for mechanics and working out the practical. But it doesn't have that, doesn't show that really whoosh of light here. It does show the drummer at 8 feet, and everybody's going to say, wow, he's so far away. Actually, in reality, he's not. But in a CAD drawing like this, I think he is. And the musicians were stationed here, on here. Dancers really used a lot of this space. But this is, it's foreshortened for a start off. My previous drawing, I think, would sell better than this. And you are selling. You're selling yourself first, your ability to produce what you're saying you're going to produce. It's about confidence. Confidence is, you know, quite often, oh, you did this? You can lie at this point, even if you got your art student to do it. Don't take the art student with you. Yeah, sure I did. I do a lot of my own drawings, but I must confess I didn't do this one. A friend of mine did this for me. And it was all, these are projection screens. This is the presentation. So these projection screens are loaded with lights, and they're 3 screens, and they're on traveler tracks up here, big I-beams, and it's all industrial rental equipment, and they move around and they raise up and down, and they all come and sit in front of the drum riser here for the big acoustic moment in the middle of the show, and they're now down here, and it's just a big moving light show with moving screens. And then to explain how that would work, I have a CAD drawing here of the moving lights around a frame, and that tells them how it's done. Because you need this spur here to the third motor, so you can tilt the screen. It also happens to have the projector on it. In this modern day, you could still do it this way. The projectors are very powerful. An 18,000 lumen projector there is way overkill. You'd be backing it. It would be a very bright picture. For this distance, you can mostly use 8,000, 10,000 lumen. At 8,000, that's kind of a large office projector. It's not so inaccessible. And there's the moving lights. These are strips of aircraft landing lights that only tilted, but they also changed color. And that was pretty much the explanation. And that's all they need to know. The technical side, any bit further than that it's over people's heads. You don't need to go into the technical, only with your production manager. That's a simple thing to arrange and a simple thing to rig, and it was mostly rental equipment. Okay, we're going to get back to the real rough hand sketching. I was explaining this was for a television show in Singapore, and I was just explaining to the the producer, this is material that's all rentable. It comes from a company, pencils again, transform it, and they make, hand went up. What can I do for you?
Do you rent everything per show, or do you do a long-term rental for the tour?
Oh, no, you rent, well, 2 ways of doing it. No, mostly it's rental per tour. If it's a tour, you rent it for the tour. You rent it for each production. Modern touring has come to, right now I work for Diana Ross, somebody of my own age. And, well, she's a little bit more mature than me. But no, there you'll find local equipment is rented. And if you're clever, you'll just produce something really simple like 2 trusses, 120 park hands. You find that everywhere. I call that the county fair rig, because every county in America has a fair, and every county in America has a lighting rig that I just described. 2 sticks of truss. It'll have a few lecos on it, or source fours, or some kind of ellipsoidal profile.
You said the name of the company was Transform It?
Yes, TRANSFORMIT.com. And they have an extensive rental. They'll also custom design. Basically what it is, it's the way these work are really clever. There's a very, very lightweight aluminum frame. It's extremely lightweight, and it's consequently a little on the fragile side, but very, very light. Nothing in this picture you couldn't carry on your own, except it's too big for you to carry on your own. This item here is 18 foot tall. And it's freestanding because it's actually a curl. But this one here, for example, and actually all of them, yes, all of them. You make the frame first, you have the material, it's like a pillowcase, you pull it over the frame and zip it up, and that's where it gets really taut. So anyway, this is the first sketch. I did this in front of her in her office. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. That's kind of what we're going at. And then in the background here, I got vertical trusses with lights on because I like to fill that whole space. Everybody seems to like to do that nowadays. And then in there, I also put in a very simple rope drop made of ordinary cotton rope. Cotton, like wool, is inherently fireproof. Ever tried lighting a Zippo lighter with no fuel? It just smolders. That's actually a cotton wick. And that's what cotton rope does. It's a good material. It's really affordable. I'll show you that later. So that's how those put together. They just zip together. And they've got a huge, huge catalog of really interesting shapes. And you can buy them, you can rent them, you can get them in singles, multiples. This is my Penn and Teller moment. I'm going to give it all away. There is no secret. I used to be extraordinarily secretive simply because it's so incredibly easy to do. The idea is the value. Have a smart idea. If you think it's good, it most probably is good. And if you think it's really good, it is good. You then have to just polish it and make it happen. And that's where lighting comes in. Lighting comes in way later. Once you've set all your materials and I understand what you're going to light, That'll tell you and dictate to you how much lighting you really need. A lot of people tend to design a beautiful pattern of lights on paper. It costs a fortune. If you start with what you need, then you can embellish it a little bit, and you're still going to have change, and you'll still have a client. And the client will still hire you because you did a really great job with minimal equipment. Minimalism is a kind of real good way of keeping and getting a job. You're the guy who actually came up with a great idea that didn't cost an arm and a leg. It's a tough world out there, so don't get creative on paper. Get creative in your mind. Use your pencil. It has an eraser. That's your best tool. You can cross off your best idea is mostly over-designed to start with. Really examine it and cut it back to 50%. You can do it. You just take away the expensive stuff. Dreams aren't made of reality, you know. So here it is. This is my final rendering. It looks very like the original sketch. I filled in the rope drop. She didn't quite understand that, but really liked all this material. Excellent stuff for lighting. And there's the result. This was 2 months of television shooting in Singapore for 57 television stations in the Far East. It was kind of like a talent show, but it wasn't. There was a winner, but they weren't really chosen. It was a little Far East for me, but hey, we just lit it. And there were 57 television studios and 54 acts, from traditional, incredibly strange instrument players from Korea to rock guitarists from Bangladesh. I mean, they were all over there. Asia is such a large place, they had to break it into 3 different areas. There's some strange music and there's some incredible music. And I was quite staggered to find that one of the contestants sold 18 million albums the year after. And who? I mean, it's a completely different world. Anyway, I was happy to be there. It's a nice place. This is the rope drop. And it's just nothing but 1/2-inch cotton rope on 6-inch centers. The hardest thing was drilling the holes in an aluminum pipe exactly. I didn't do it. I went to a man who knows about drilling holes, and it cost peanuts. He provided the aluminum, he ground it, and he made it all nice and smooth. He had it black powder coated. All I had to do, well, I used the words as the royal eye. Somebody I had working for me spent a few days tying figure-of-8 knots in the top. At the bottom is also another pipe with the same holes, but instead of tying a knot there, we used little alligator clips, which we bought in Radio Shack. Yes, I need 190 Radio Shack clips, please. I haven't got them on the shelf. So anyway, that way you can tension each individual strand. But that makes a fabulous backdrop. When it's lit, it looks like neon. I have another picture, I think. Yeah, there you are. Behind the rope drop is a really ordinary old fiber optic star cloth. That was a rental. Got it right there in Singapore. The rope drop we took with us, but that just came out of a flight case that was 4 foot long, maybe by 3 by 3. And the whole of the rope and the pipe cost less than $1,200, plus a little bit of manufacturing. It's a great gag, actually. I make them in 4 foot lengths, 4 foot pipe lengths, simply because it goes into a small box, because I want to get it on an airplane sooner or later. And that was, yeah, I recommend it, really do. It lights up like neon. And then the other good thing is you don't have to light it from the top, although we have got top lighting on here. It's perfectly fine to just light it up from the bottom. And that, again, if you're touring around the place, especially if you're using local lighting companies to provide the core of the lighting, you might just have a little package of moving lights. Put them on the floor. You've always guaranteed a floor. Gravity is everywhere. It's on your side. You should expect nothing, really. You need electricity, so you ask for it. You need a platform to stand on. But everything else you're good if you get it. And that includes hanging points. So don't expect to be able to hang everything. In fact, assume you can't. That's already taken up by something else. Some theaters you'll go into, and I'd like to hang something up there, but I see you've got all your equipment up there. And I'm not using your equipment. Oh, you can't touch that because that's regged for the repertory, you know, the play that's coming in, or the play, we're playing a Sunday and they're having a day off. That's the kind of thing you'll come across. So, yeah, assume nothing. But you can always rely on gravity, and you'll always have a floor. It might not be even, but you'll put it. So this kind of thing is very well lit from the ground. I like floor lighting. It's also hidden behind here. So here's a balloon, big gold crane that zoomed around, and this is that 18-foot piece that's just a big old curve. Now, we're getting into the realm of television. The way this was built we have cross shots. A lot of times you'll see a cross shot and it ends up in blackness. Black on television is really boring. It also, there's no continuity between the front picture, the front of house shot, and the side shot shooting into black. So these are all really just for the cross shot. And those curves there, although they look flat from this position, were set at about 30 degrees angle. So the cross shot, they all lined up with each other. And that's the way to think about television. In fact, that's the way to think about everything. Because in a theater even, somebody's going to get a near cross shot from where I'm standing now. I could be in the cheap seat right in front of the PA, but I'm going to see into the wings. And I'm going to see the monitor engineer and all the stuff that you don't really want to see. And that kind of destroys your little illusion. There's too much reality happening over there. So try and wrap your screenery and your scenery, and try and make entrances and exits invisible. Right here, that screen is an edge and that screen goes on, but you could walk in and come in here. These lights here are actually part of the film stuff. I used to just move those around. They're LED, they're just to light up and take out shadows on instruments like drums and so on, or keyboard players, and they got shuffled around to different bands, for different bands. But there was an entrance right here. You just appear straight there. There's another entrance between those two, and again over there. So people, and the center stage entrance is really great. It can be used, obviously. I appear, I walk through the door, or you can use it in a way that's it's a gag, it's a disappearing trick. A center stage door is actually really clever. I've got one to show you in one of my 3 examples. Anyway, going along, here we are. That's a real good expression of the light, rope light. You can see I'm just using moving lights, wash lights, not profile, just wash. And more drawings. This is my FUTV design. I tried selling this to Boston, didn't quite get the joke. The sheep are all sort of going towards the television station. And there was a variation on the same thing. This I would have done as digital print. You can borrow this idea if you want, just give me a small credit. But it was an industrial look. It was on aluminum frame. I haven't put the lights in, but wherever there's aluminum truss, I'm going to put lights. It's a great way of stretching canvas or backdrops, just little rubber bungees. And again, this next time would have been hand painted, but now it'll be a real simple cinch to do digital. So let's assume those are 20-foot, let's say they're 24-foot square. And again, these, see, I've got to rake they're angled in. So this comes down, there's a little space right here for the entrance, left and right entrances. But there's a great cross-shot picture there. And I would say each of those would cost about $9,000 each to print. Done. There's a hand. I like hands.
So how does that compare with, and I realize it's a different concept, how would that compare with maybe setting them up as screens and running digital projection on them and then having a lot more options? Is it a price consideration, or is it a completely different thought altogether?
Wow, there's a lot of things to consider in there. It's actually quite a really good question. I'll have to think about the answer. Okay. There's some pluses and there's some minuses to projection. Projection is always in contest with lighting. And lighting is always kind of annoyed by projection. Lighting usually overpowers projection. You'll end up with shadows on your screen. You don't really like that. It really determines how you're going to use your lighting and where you're going to put your lighting. Lighting, unfortunately, doesn't always come from one place. One light, it comes from the proper end, but you also get spill. Some lights actually leak a lot of light. So you'll get, if I'm going to put lights up here, and I'm going to have them all shining down, and I've got a little haze in the air, well, the haze acts as a veil, now I can see the beam of the projector. It's also reduced the amount of light coming out of the projector. And it's also, I've got light in front of the screen in the form of a beam. The light is really going to diminish on projection. You could go to rear projection, but the problem with rear projection is as soon as you come off, there's the space behind stage. Even if you use a 0.8 lens, which is 1:1, that means every foot from the lens to the screen, you get 1 foot of width, picture width. So if these are 24 foot wide, I have to be 24 plus. I need more for the space. That's for the lens. You still need space for the platform and the projector. So that's quite a lot of backstage, and you're not going to get that anywhere.
And if it's opera or ballet, it's just making it.
If I were to do this projection-wise, I'd do it front projection. And then I'd have to really think hard about my lighting. Then your lighting is completely dominated by your projection. And once you start projection, you've got to carry on projection, because now you've got a screen that's just empty. And an empty screen just looks like a blind eye. It just looks dead. And you have no control over it. We'll talk about blackouts. I might as well talk about blackouts now. Blackouts have a real hazard of you losing control. You've got to own everything, literally. That's a good expression. If you go to a blackout, the eye immediately starts to iris open, and suddenly it's not dark anymore. That exit sign, that person's cell phone videoing everything, we'll talk about them later. You'll be surprised how much ambient light there is in a room. And the moment you go to blackout, you've lost control. You have lost the total illusion. So you never really go to blackout. You go to blackout, but you always restore within 2 seconds and come up with an ultraviolet or something really dark. But that, just by doing that, you've hung on to, you're the man in charge or the girl in charge. You're the person holding the illusion together. As soon as you stop lighting something, it's not yours anymore. And that's the same with screenery. They just look really blank, and they'll start reflecting all the bounce light and everything else you don't really need. Wary of blackouts. They're good fun, but they're not to last. They're a momentary punctuation. Consider them a comma or a period, and then start the next sentence straight away. So yeah, I will do that in projection. The advantage of projection, of course, is you can put up multiple material. You've just walked into a huge budgetary thing right there. This is cheap and affordable, actually, because this stays what it is. You can change it. This is what I like about this, is there's an industrial thing going on here. I'm now a lighting designer. What am I going to do here? Well, I'm going to definitely do a day and night sequence. I'm going to do, the day is very short in lighting. It's really not easy to, it's not interesting, actually. The night, the sunset and the sunrise, they're really interesting. And the nighttime is interesting, because darkness is the lighting man's friend. So, yeah, I'd be happy to do this just as a fixed scene. This was a band that only played 75 minutes. Still a long time. But I've got this industrial thing here which invites smoke and machinery and silhouettes of cogs and wheels. And you can make that kind of animate, and with red light pulsing, you can make it quite like a foundry. I mean, these were all the ideas I had in my head of dealing with what I was presenting. This part over here was deliberately empty so I could do all the daylight things. So I suggest time of day here and activity there. It's very theatrical, this. It's a one scene, and you can make it work for a long time. And for that much landscape, I think it's pretty cheap. Yeah, you'd get the whole thing done for less than $30,000. That sounds like a lot. It's a small house in some states. But you can make it down smaller. I mean, if you're in a small club and you want to use screens, wow, that's almost nothing. Digital printing is fairly affordable. Who do you go to for digital printing? It's poster art, you know, Billboard, those companies, they'll do it. You'll find some are really good. There's a place up in Utah, and I'm not quite sure, I could find out for you. Fusion Imaging. The Smithsonian use them. This is the company I use, actually. Oh, this is a giveaway. They use 15 colors, 3 blacks and 2 whites on white material. And they can print up to 30 feet wide and endlessly long, because it just comes off a roll. They'll stitch for you. They'll stitch panels together for you. Oh, while we're on stitching, if you ever make a backdrop, make sure all the seams are vertical, especially in television.
Make them what?
Vertical. All seams always vertical, especially if you're using a camera. Reason? If you have a horizontal seam and you've got a tracking shot, guess what? There's a seam right through the whole shot. At least with a vertical seam, you can get the out seam, you can cut away to another camera and come right back to it again, and your tracking shot's still there. This is the stuff. This is really the knowledge I'd like to give you. It's common sense, but I learned that the hard way. I really did learn that the hard way, and it still haunts me because there's a video out there with all these horizontal seams running through it. So that was an expensive error. Well, error, oversight. So yeah, these different buildings, and I try and light them differently. And also, with the light material, you can light certain areas from the back as well. For example, my industrial area here, I just put some real big, old, powerful, clunky old footlights that cost nothing to rent. Put a big red gel in it, put another one next to it with an orange gel, and just set them on a little two-step chase or a multiple chase, so you get this irregular kind of pulsing as if it was a foundry at night. And then when I get into my nighttime scene, I'd make it light up with somehow light evening, and then later a particular point of music, a poignant moment, I'd start that little effect for maybe a song or two. But it's scenery, it's place, it's setting. And the lighting really is dictated to you by this.